Hey guys, tonight we journey somewhere both scorching and strangely soothing, the endless shimmering sands of the desert. The wind is warm, dry as bone, whispering against your ears like a lullaby made of dust. The light is low and golden, stretching across dunes that roll on forever, soft as velvet and sharp as glass depending on your step. You're standing on the edge of the known world, or at least it feels that way. The kind of place where your GPS would politely give up and say, "Good luck, buddy. You probably won't survive this, by the way." Not unless you've figured out how to find water using a goat, navigate by the position of Venus, or outstare a camel into cooperation. Spoiler, you haven't. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love seeing the little sleep map we build together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive just as the sun is melting into the dunes, bleeding amber and mauve across the sand. The air, still warm, carries the scent of dry brush and distant smoke. You're not entirely sure how you got here. 1 minute you were scrolling through YouTube and now you're standing ankle-deep in orange gold powder, blinking against the wind. But don't worry, you're expected. A figure approaches from the horizon, robes flowing like seaweed in slow motion, face hidden behind layers of cloth that look surprisingly stylish. This is your host, a Bedouin elder whose eyes seem to squint straight through your soul and into your hydration levels. With a slow nod, they gesture for you to follow. There are no roads, no signs, and definitely no welcome centers out here. But somehow your feet find the path, soft and winding. Around you the desert begins to hum, not loudly, just enough for you to notice how alive it is. A beetle skitters across a dune. A lone bird cries overhead, probably wondering why you're out here looking like someone forgot to pack lunch. The tent appears suddenly, half hidden in the dunes. It's large, low-slung, and woven from a rich brown fabric that looks tough enough to wrestle a sandstorm. Spoiler, it kind of is. This is a traditional Bedouin beach char, or house of hair. And yes, it's made from goat hair. Turns out, goat hair is desert magic. When it's dry, the weave lets air pass through. When it rains, rare but dramatic, the fibers swell, sealing the tent tight like a waterproof cocoon. Historians still argue whether this textile technique predates the wheel, or if it evolved later alongside Bedouin migration patterns. You duck inside, blinking as your eyes adjust. The space is cool, dim, and smells faintly of cardamom, firewood, and whatever spice was last spilled by someone with butterfingers. Woven mats line the floor, and cushions are casually tossed in a way that suggests someone could host a poetry reading or a nap at any moment. You're handed a cup of kawar, Arabic coffee, infused with green cardamom pods and poured from a long-spouted pot called a dala. It's more golden than brown, less bitter than you expect, and served in a tiny handleless cup. You sip and nod solemnly like you've been doing this forever. Your host doesn't buy it, but appreciates the effort. This coffee ceremony is no small thing. It's a symbol of welcome, peace, and patience. The server, often the youngest in the group, starts pouring from the right, making sure to never overfill the cup. That's because traditionally you're expected to finish in 3 sips, then hand it back with a polite shake. If you want a refill, don't shake. If you don't want one, give it a gentle waggle like you're politely declining more hummus at a family dinner. Or you could just spill it by accident, which has its own consequences, none of them good. The air in the tent is cooler now, the heat of the day slinking off somewhere to lick its wounds. Outside, the sun has dipped below the dunes, leaving behind a faint lavender afterglow. You hear the distant groan of a camel, half complaint, half belch. It's oddly comforting. In the old days, these moments twilight beneath the tent were for sharing stories, whispering family secrets and discussing trade routes that crossed oceans of sand. These weren't just rest stops, they were cultural nerve centers. A single tent could host a traveler from Damascus, a merchant from Cairo, and a poet with nothing to trade but verses. Everyone knew someone who once met a prince, or so they claimed. A fringe tidbit for you, some Bedouin families wove hidden messages into the patterns of their tent fabric. Little clues about clan history, regional allegiance, or just creative gossip. Historians can't quite agree if these motifs were conscious communication or just coincidence, but it wouldn't be the only time fashion doubled as a family newsletter. You lean back on a cushion and watch the flame in the center fire pit dance like it knows you're tired. You're starting to feel it, that deep, pleasant drag behind your eyes, the one that says maybe 5 more minutes and then I'll bawl, but not yet. You're just getting started. The desert has a lot more to show you before it lets you rest. The tent rustles in the breeze. Somewhere outside, a goat sneezes dramatically. You're not sure why that's so funny, but it is. It's going to be a long, peaceful night. The kind where time forgets to move, and you forget you ever had a phone. You wake to the faint clinking of metal, and the soft hush of sand, shifting outside the tent. It's not quite morning, but not night either. One of those in-between hours where time doesn't feel fully committed to either job. The desert is cool, not cold, and the first pale traces of dawn paint the horizon with a gentle, sleepy pink. You blink, sit up, and find yourself wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of smoke and cardamom. Someone, probably your host, has already stoked the fire pit. The coals pulse gently like a heartbeat under ash. No alarm clocks out here, just the quiet rhythm of people who've been waking with the wind for centuries. Outside the tent, you hear murmurs, voices speaking low and evenly. Bedouin mornings aren't rushed. There's a routine to them, like a song with only 3 notes: fire, coffee, camels. Everything else can wait. You shuffle out of the tent, barefoot, brushing grains of sand from your ankles. The desert floor is surprisingly smooth, compacted by countless feet and the wind's careful fingers. A young boy, maybe 10, kneels beside a blackened kettle, rotating it slowly over a small flame. He's already poured water and added a scoop of bitter ground coffee. A few cardamom pods float like tiny green boats. He gives you a grin that says, "You're late." He's not wrong. Coffee again. Always coffee. But Bedouin kahwa isn't about caffeine, though it doesn't hurt. It's about continuity. The first cup of the day is for focus. The second is for friendship. The third, if you're lucky, is for poetry. It's said that in some tribes, men weren't considered full adults until they could brew a proper cup without scalding the pot or offending their uncles. No pressure. Your host greets you with a nod and a gesture toward the camels, who are at best indifferent to your presence. One of them turns its head to stare at you in that long, unblinking camel way. You've never felt so judged by something with hooves. Morning routines among the Bedouins are deceptively simple. First, there's the inspection. Checking tent ropes, water skins, the firewood bundle, and most importantly, the camels. These aren't just animals. They're wealth, transport, storage units and mood boards rolled into one. The slightest change in a camel's temperament might mean a storm is coming, or that you forgot to feed it. A mainstream fact for you: Bedouins often named their camels with the same care others reserve for children. Names reflected personality, appearance or ancestry. A swift, stubborn camel might be named surreal, meaning fast. A gentle, slow walker might be hanin, meaning longing. And yes, some names were total sarcasm. Historians still argue whether this naming tradition was rooted in practical herding or poetic expression. Maybe both. The line between the two is blurry out here. You watch as the morning unfolds like a slow dance. A woman emerges from another tent, balancing a flat metal tray stacked with rounds of dough. She heads toward a small stone slab set up over coals, the makings of arbood, a kind of Bedouin flatbread cooked directly on hot stones or under a layer of ash. It smells like flour and smoke and comfort. You're handed a piece. It's blistered, warm and unexpectedly chewy. You tear a corner, dip it in a tin of olive oil and za'atar, and suddenly all of your modern breakfasts feel suspiciously underwhelming. Who needs avocado toast when you've got this? And there, just past the tents, lies a small pen of goats. One stares at you while chewing something with deep moral conviction. You feel vaguely threatened. Turns out Bedouin mornings are full of judgment. Camels, goats, 10-year-old baristas. The sun begins its slow rise, and with it the landscape starts to shift. What looked like endless beige turns into subtle streaks of peach, gold and dusty rose. Rocks cast long shadows like fallen sundials. A falcon glides overhead, then vanishes behind a distant dune. Everything moves slowly, intentionally, as if the desert itself has agreed to ease you into the day. A fringe tidbit: in certain Bedouin regions, waking dreams were taken seriously. If someone stirred from sleep and spoke of a clear vision of water, a lost item, or a long-dead relative, others might listen intently, adjusting their plans based on it. Even today, some desert communities maintain this quiet respect for what the subconscious coughs up at dawn. You try not to think about the dream you had where a goat made you file taxes. Probably not prophetic. Back in the tent, the mats have been brushed clean, and the cushions realigned with geometric precision. No chaos here. Everything has its place, even rest. You settle again with another small cup of kahwa, watching steam rise as the wind swirls around you, tugging gently at the edges of your robe. Your muscles ache a little from sleeping on the ground, but it's the good kind of ache, the kind that reminds you you're a body, not just a brain with Wi-Fi. And so the Bedouin morning continues, quiet, unhurried, resistant to the tyranny of the clock. There's no inbox to clear, no app updates, just sand, wind, fire, and the slow unfurling of sunlight across a world that doesn't need hurrying. Out here, even time seems to exhale. The sun has officially clocked in for the day. It stretches higher above the horizon now, spilling light across the dunes with that golden overconfidence unique to desert mornings. It's warm, not yet hot, but you can already feel the promise of the furnace that's coming later. Don't worry, we'll get to that. For now, it's time to move. The Bedouins don't believe in lingering too long. Even when life is peaceful, there's a rhythm here, an inherited tempo passed down through generations. The camp begins to stir with a quiet momentum. Mats are rolled, fires are stoked, and camels are given long, suspicious side-eyes by the people who'll be riding them. You rub the sleep from your eyes and follow your host out into the open. A low wind whistles across the sand. It's soft now, but you sense it could throw a tantrum if provoked. The tents behind you stand like low mountains of fabric, tethered to the earth by ropes and tradition. Today, you'll join the daily routine, the chores, the tasks, the casual avoidance of sunburn and dehydration, which sounds simple, until you realize that survival in this landscape requires a specific kind of genius, the kind that doesn't brag. First order of business, gathering firewood, and yes, there's a joke in here, because when you're surrounded by thousands of miles of not trees, finding wood sounds about as likely as finding Wi-Fi. But Bedouins have a secret. They don't need traditional logs, they use dry shrubs, fallen twigs, and wait for it, camel dung. Before you cringe, remember dried camel droppings burn clean, hot, and long. They're basically nature's charcoal briquettes. Fringe fact, some Bedouin groups even had different names for dung based on the camel's diet and how well it burned. Historians still argue whether this classification system was symbolic, scientific, or just the result of having too much time between oases. You help gather a few with a long stick, trying not to look too modern about it. Oh yes, this dung is exceptionally flammable. You say it with a straight face, and your host raises one amused eyebrow. You're learning. Next, water, or more specifically, the absence of it. You walk with the group to a well which, miraculously, exists in this stretch of emptiness. Wells like these were lifelines, often known only to certain tribes, fiercely protected like family heirlooms. The one before you is modest, a circle of stones with a rope dangling into darkness. A bucket creaks as it's pulled up, and you get your first drink of the day. It's warm, faintly mineral, and tastes like the miracle it is. Most Bedouins don't gulp, they sip, slowly, with reverence. Every drop has been wrestled from the earth, and that gives it a flavor you won't find in bottled brands. Sometimes, they'd even thank the well itself, whispering small blessings. You consider doing the same, but the well has seen better prayers. Then comes the fire, the heart of the camp. The gathered fuel is arranged, and someone strikes a flame using flint and steel. Sparks dance, smoke rises, and the coffee pot returns to center stage, like a celebrity doing a second encore. But this time, breakfast is on the menu too. Someone unwraps a parcel of labneh, a tangy yogurt cheese rolled into balls and preserved in oil. You scoop some with your bread, along with salty olives and a smear of something red and mysterious. Probably harissa, possibly dragon paste. Either way, your tongue tingles and your sinuses applaud. You eat seated in a circle. No chairs, no cutlery, just fingers and a shared understanding. Food tastes better when eaten communally, slowly, and with a bit of teasing. Someone points at your posture, chuckles, and adjusts your sitting stance with a nudge, knees bent, feet tucked, no lounging like a Roman emperor. You nod solemnly, adjusting like a student trying to impress their yoga instructor. The group pretends not to laugh. As breakfast winds down, someone begins brushing sand from around the tent pegs. It seems ridiculous. Why sweep a floor made of sand? But this too is ritual. Clean lines, neat edges, daily respect for the space. Even in the most chaotic environments, the Bedouin world thrives on order. Not the kind you write down, the kind you feel. And just when you think the chores are over, someone brings out a blanket. Not for napping, though that would be lovely, but for repairs. The edges of a goat hair panel have begun to fray, and a woman begins stitching them with quick, practiced fingers. Her needle gleams in the sun, her thread glides like water, and you realize this is how these tents last for decades. Daily love, quiet care, tiny acts of survival disguised as sewing. A mainstream fact, Bedouin tents are modular. Each section, often crafted by different family members, can be taken apart and moved quickly in case of weather, conflict, or opportunity. It's a system designed for mobility, built by people who measure wealth not in square footage, but in how quickly you can fold it. You help hold one edge of the fabric, trying not to tangle the thread. The woman doesn't speak much, but her eyes crinkle in a way that says, "You'll get there," and just like that, the desert has taught you its first real lesson. Nothing is rushed, but everything is moving. The sun climbs higher, casting shorter shadows, bleaching color from everything. The dunes lose their gold and settle into a harsh, brilliant white. You squint, wondering how anyone can see in this. Your host hands you a length of fabric. It's a keffiyeh, the traditional head covering. He wraps it around your head, snug but breathable, leaving a tail to drape over your shoulder. You immediately feel cooler, shadier, sharper, like maybe, just maybe, you won't faint before noon. Somewhere behind you, the camels grunt in unison. It's their way of saying, good luck. Now, it's time to face the camels. You knew this moment would come. You've seen pictures, maybe even ridden one once at a tourist stop where someone in a polo shirt said, "Smile for the camera." But this is different. Here, camels aren't props or petting zoo celebrities. They're co-workers, they're survival machines, and they have strong opinions. The animals are gathered a short walk from the tents, their long necks swaying like slow-moving cranes. Their bodies are massive but elegant, if by elegant you mean grumpy, bony and capable of emitting noises that sound like underwater bagpipes. You approach cautiously. One camel turns its head and stares directly into your soul. Its lower jaw shifts in slow, sarcastic motion. This one's name is Fujia, your host says. It means dawn. Fujia, judging by her expression, would rather be called, not today, but she's yours, for now. Your host demonstrates how to saddle her. First you lay a thick padded cloth across her back, called a shidard, to prevent chafing. Then comes the saddle itself, simple but sturdy, with a high front and back to keep you from sliding off mid-ride. Straps are tightened, adjustments made. Fujia flutters her lips and shifts her weight dramatically, like she's auditioning for a soap opera. Historians still argue whether early saddle designs originated in North Africa or Central Asia, but most agree that the Bedouins perfected the art of camel gear. Every strap, buckle and blanket serves a purpose, from keeping you upright to avoiding bruises in places you didn't know could bruise. Finally your host gives the signal, and Fujia lowers herself into a sitting position, knees buckling in stages until she collapses like a deck chair. You're invited to climb aboard. No ladder, just determination and an awkward grunt. You swing your leg, miss slightly, try again, and eventually settle into the saddle with all the grace of a pineapple in a beach chair. Then without warning, Fujia stands up, front legs first, then back, which means you are momentarily pitched forward, then flung backward like you're on a slow-motion amusement park ride, built entirely of sass and fur. Your host says something encouraging. You can't hear it over your own heartbeat. The caravan moves. You ride out into the dunes, the camp shrinking behind you until it's no more than a smudge in the sand. The camel sways rhythmically beneath you, a rolling motion that's strangely hypnotic once you surrender to it. You stop gripping the saddle so tightly, your shoulders drop, your breath aligns with the pace. 1, 2, 3, sway. A mainstream fact here, camels can travel up to 25 miles a day in desert heat, carrying hundreds of pounds and needing little water. Their feet are wide and padded, their nostrils can close to block sand, and their humps, yes, just fat, not water, sustain them for days. They're walking miracles disguised as giant toddlers with an attitude. The scenery unfolds in gradients of gold and beige. You pass patches of hardy desert plants, ramram, thumam, and the stubborn gadda, shrubs that seem to thrive just to spite the sun. Occasionally you spot tracks in the sand, fox, lizard, maybe a snake, maybe something older. Your host points them out like he's reading a novel on the ground. Suddenly you stop. Your host dismounts and gestures for you to follow. You slide off less gracefully than hoped, and walk toward a set of flat stones arranged in a rough circle. This, he says, was once a Bedouin gathering spot, perhaps a trading station, or a family resting point during migration. No one really knows, but the stones remain, whispering stories into the wind. Fringe tidbit. Some Bedouin tribes placed small objects, beads, bits of pottery, even teeth, under stones to mark their passing. Not graves, not offerings, just little breadcrumbs for whoever came next. Historians debate whether these were signs for kin, warnings, or just quiet declarations. We were here. You sit beside one of the stones. The sun is higher now, but still tolerable. You sip water from a goatskin pouch, surprisingly cool, surprisingly not terrible. There's something about drinking from leather that makes it feel ancient. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve and watch the camels chew and grunt and contemplate revenge. Fujia sneezes. It's a full-body event, a trumpet blast of dust and air that nearly knocks your turban off. You cough, laugh, and accept that dignity is no longer part of this journey. Your host hands you a palmful of hubs arabi, simple flatbread, and a chunk of dried date. You chew slowly, sand sticking to your lips. There's no escape from it. Sand in your mouth, your socks, your soul. You are one with the dunes now. As the midday sun approaches, you and the camels begin to circle back toward camp. The return journey feels quieter, dreamier. You sway with Fujia, who now tolerates your presence with mild indifference. A truce has been declared. The camp reappears like a mirage turning solid. Tents flap gently in the breeze. A child runs across the sand, chasing a chicken that clearly disagrees with this plan. Your muscles ache in interesting places. Your mouth is dry, but your heart is oddly full. You made it. Camels are unsaddled, ropes are coiled, water is shared. Fajia sits, snorts, and promptly rolls onto her side in a dramatic show of post-work exhaustion. You're not far behind. You return to the tent with the gait of someone who has just survived a small war, or in this case, their first full ride on a camel named Fajia. She's off chewing her cud in the shade now, having decided she's done her part for the day. You, meanwhile, collapse onto a cushion like you've just crossed an entire continent. The air inside the tent is cool, still, and smells faintly of mint and leather. Now it's time for a different kind of lesson. How to dress for the desert like a proper Bedouin, not a flustered tourist melting in polyester. Your host gestures for you to remove your outer robe, and someone hands you a set of traditional garments. A long white tunic called a thobe, a loose-fitting robe called a bisht, and a fresh length of cloth for your head. You hold it all like a student clutching supplies for the first day of school, unsure where to start. But dressing Bedouin style is not just about aesthetics, it's about engineering. Every layer has a purpose, and every fold is a silent agreement with the sun. The thobe is made of cotton or linen, designed to trap cool air near your body and reflect sunlight. It's loose on purpose. Tight clothing in the desert is a one-way ticket to regret. The bisht, often reserved for special occasions, adds protection against both sun and nighttime chill. And then there's the keffiyeh, that iconic square of cloth that has saved more noses, necks and pride than most modern inventions. You let your host wrap the keffiyeh for you again, this time with a little more flair. One tail goes over the shoulder, the other across your face. The fabric filters the air you breathe, keeping out dust while somehow making you look 10% more mysterious. Not bad for a square of cloth. Mainstream fact, the keffiyeh isn't just Bedouin, it's used across the Arab world, in varying colors and patterns. Black and white in Palestine, red and white in Jordan, plain white in parts of the Gulf. Its design is functional, yes, but it also signals identity, origin, and sometimes even political leanings. Historians still argue whether its widespread symbolism was accidental or part of a long, quiet cultural evolution. You step outside into the light, fully dressed in your new uniform, and suddenly, the heat doesn't feel so sharp. The fabric moves with the wind, not against it. You're not sweating in your clothes, you're sweating through them, and the breeze carries it away. Genius. Someone hands you a belt made of rope. You tie it around your waist and discover that it not only keeps the robe from flapping dramatically in the breeze, but also serves as an all-purpose tool holder, if you had any tools. You settle for tucking a date into it for later. Practicality, meet snack time. Nearby, a young woman is sifting sand through her fingers, inspecting it like a jeweler, inspecting uncut stones. She's looking for fine grains to mix with ash and oil for a traditional skin scrub. You kneel beside her, and she smiles as if to say, you have no idea what's coming. Welcome to the Bedouin skincare routine. Forget department store serums. Out here, beauty is sand, oil, and ritual. The scrub she's mixing will exfoliate your skin within an inch of its life, but in a good way. She gestures for you to roll up your sleeves, and offers a pinch of the mixture. It's warm, gritty, and smells faintly of musk and salt. You rub it onto your arms and feel the desert itself scrubbing away the morning's camel-induced trauma. Then, the kohl. She takes a small brass container, shaped like a tiny genie lamp, and dips a slender stick into its mouth. The kohl is dark, smooth, almost velvety. With a quick motion, she applies it beneath your lower eyelid. At first it tickles. Then suddenly, your eyes feel cooler, shielded from glare, dust and the weariness of squinting all day. Fringe tidbit, while many associate kohl with vanity, it was, and still is, a practical defense against the sun's brutal reflection off the sand. Think of it as desert sunglasses. In fact, archaeological evidence shows Egyptian workers, not just royalty, wore it while building pyramids. Historians debate whether the style spread through Bedouins via trade, migration, or simple shared logic, probably all three. You blink at your reflection in a polished metal plate, and do a double take. You don't look like a visitor anymore. You look like someone who belongs, or at least someone who knows what not to wear. Suddenly, you understand why Bedouin clothing hasn't changed much in centuries. It doesn't need to. It already solved the problems you didn't know you had: sunburn, sweat rash and sand in every imaginable place. A few feet away, someone else is applying henna, deep red-brown paste made from crushed leaves mixed with lemon juice, and left to stain the skin. They're painting a hand with intricate swirls and dots, each symbol with its own meaning: protection, fertility, celebration. You watch as the paste dries in the sun, cracking like desert soil, then flaking off to reveal a soft glowing orange beneath. You're offered a small pattern, just a circle on your palm. You nod, and they begin. The sensation is cool, ticklish. The design is simple but lovely. You open your hand and stare at it, this tiny deliberate mark in the middle of a vast shifting world. A wind stirs, sand lifts. The camp shifts into shadow for a moment, as if the dunes themselves are adjusting their posture. You've been here long enough now to sense how everything connects: clothing, weather, routine. Nothing is random. Everything is earned. And somewhere behind you, Fajr snorts with what might be approval. The sun climbs higher, and with it, the wind picks up, just a whisper at first, then a steady voice brushing over the dunes. It carries the smell of sun-warmed stone, and the faint spice of distant cooking fires. You've learned the morning rhythms now: the coffee, the camel, the clothing. But the real question remains: how does anyone actually get around out here? The desert isn't just a sea of sand, it's a vast, changing map, and you're about to learn how to read it. Not with a compass, but with memory, instinct, and a casual disregard for what modern GPS would consider sane. You set out again, this time on foot, guided by your host and a young girl named Huda, whose job today is to teach you how not to get hopelessly lost. She's maybe 12, barefoot, and walks like someone who's memorized the movement of every grain of sand. You squint at the endless sameness, trying to spot a landmark, any landmark. But to your untrained eyes, everything looks like a duplicate dune. Huda stops, crouches and points to a shadow, not the obvious kind, a subtle slant near the base of a dune, where the sand darkens ever so slightly. Wind came from the west last night, she says, through your host's translation. You nod slowly like that means anything to you. Mainstream fact: Bedouins have traditionally navigated without maps, clocks, or written directions. They use ilm el-tariq, the science of the path. It involves reading stars, shadows, patterns in the sand, and even the taste of the soil. Yes, taste. Some tribes could identify proximity to a known oasis just by the saltiness of the earth underfoot. Historians still argue whether this was widespread knowledge or specific to a few particularly salty elders with adventurous palates. You dip your fingers in the sand and give it a cautious sniff. No salt, just sand, possibly regret. As you continue walking, Huda points out landmarks you'd never have noticed. A cluster of small stones forming an arrow, a strangely bent shrub, a ridge shaped vaguely like a sleeping dog. To you, it's abstract desert sculpture. To her, it's a navigational guide more reliable than anything Apple ever made. Then, she stops. Do you hear that? You pause. At first, nothing. Then, a faint rustle like paper being torn very slowly. It's the wind, brushing through tamarisk trees clustered near a hidden wadi, a dry riverbed. You approach and see the faint traces of past water flow, like a scar across the sand. In the rainy season, short, dramatic, and bossy, these wadis fill quickly. But for now, they serve as roads, smooth, firm and flanked by greenery that somehow hasn't gotten the memo about living in a desert. Fringe tidbit: some Bedouins would plant markers, little clusters of rocks or bent twigs, at key turns in a wadi, not for themselves, but for travelers who might pass days or even weeks later. It was an informal system of hospitality, a silent breadcrumb trail left by people who knew exactly how it felt to be lost. You rest beside the trees, wiping sweat from your brow. The sun is sharp now, reflecting off the sand like the desert's holding up a giant mirror. You wrap your keffiyeh tighter and sip water from your pouch. Huda doesn't seem to notice the heat. She points to a dune in the distance and says, "That's where you'll practice reading the wind." Reading the wind, yes. You climb the dune together, slowly, steadily, sliding back one step for every two forward. At the top, the view opens up like a scroll. Miles of dunes curl and dip like the folds of a giant sleeping creature. The wind here is stronger, lifting tiny bursts of sand that flick against your ankles. You close your eyes. Your host gestures at the patterns forming below. The sand ripples in long, deliberate streaks, shaped by wind that hasn't missed a shift in centuries. By reading these patterns, knowing their direction, the tightness of the curves, how fresh the marks are, Bedouins can estimate not just where they are, but where the wind has been, where it will go next, which dunes might shift, which might hold steady. You try. You really do. You squint at the ridges. You nod, thoughtfully. You even mumble something about easterly drift to sound clever. Huda raises an eyebrow and mutters something that definitely translates to, he has no idea. Still, you're trying, and out here, that matters. Suddenly, your host pulls a small leather pouch from his robe and opens it to reveal a mix of dried fruit, nuts and salted seeds. Trail mix, Bedouin style. You munch quietly as the wind whistles by, carrying your scent to who knows where. You ask if people ever get truly lost. Your host nods. Yes, even the best sometimes miss a turn. A sandstorm can erase paths in seconds. That's why knowledge is shared, not hoarded. Everyone teaches the young. Everyone passes on roots and rhythms like heirlooms. And if you do get lost, well, look for birds circling low. Look for ants. Yes, ants. They only build near water sources. Listen for the shape of silence, how the wind changes near a ridge or cave. And if all else fails, walk at night. Follow the stars. Let Orion lead the way. Mainstream fact. The Bedouins have names for dozens of stars, each with its own story. Some guide travelers, others signal planting seasons or coming rains. Constellations are more than dots in the sky. They're roadmaps, family trees, and calendars written in fire. You sit quietly for a while, watching the wind etch fresh lines into the sand. The world moves slowly here, but it moves with purpose. Nothing is wasted, no mark goes unnoticed. And as you stand to leave, you take one last glance back at the endless shimmering patterns behind you. You won't remember all the paths, but you'll remember how it felt to walk them, barefoot, careful, curious, and not completely lost. You trudge on, a little slower now, as the sun continues its merciless climb into the white-hot sky. Even with your loose robe, your keffiyeh, and your best attempt at walking like someone who belongs here, the heat presses down like a thick wool blanket fresh out of the oven. You start to wonder, how does anyone survive out here for more than a day? Your water pouch is almost empty, and the last of your trail mix mysteriously disappeared. You swear a goat was involved. You wipe your brow. Again, the wind stirs, dry and toasty. The sand has begun to shimmer, the air dancing just above the dunes, and then someone laughs. Your host, that calm desert sage, gestures at your nearly empty pouch and says, somewhat kindly, that you drink water like a city child. You blink. He opens a pouch of his own, barely a third full. You realize then that the Bedouin don't just have water. They understand it, honor it, stretch it like spun gold. Mainstream fact, water is life in the desert, and the Bedouins have mastered its conservation over centuries. A single drop isn't just refreshment, it's strategy. They drink little, and often. They pace themselves. They know which plants retain moisture, how to trap dew, and how to find water where outsiders see only dust and doom. Today you're going to learn the most important desert lesson, how to find water when the map says, nope. You follow a trail into a shallow basin, a depression in the sand surrounded by clumps of stubborn green. There's no stream, no glimmering oasis, just a few scraggly shrubs, a ring of darker sand, and a faint smell of damp earth. If you press your nose into it, and imagine really hard, but your host drops to his knees and starts digging, with a stick, like he's planting something. You watch skeptically. 2 minutes pass, 5, then cool, dark sand, a hint of moisture, more digging, eventually, water, murky, slow, but real. Fringe tidbit. These shallow desert wells are called kuf. They're often dug near seasonal wadis, where groundwater lingers just below the surface. Some tribes even place tiny clay markers nearby, barely visible, so future travelers know where to dig. It's a literal treasure map, but you need the codebook. You help bail out a cupful. The water is warm and vaguely gritty. It tastes like hope and sand. You pretend not to notice the crunch. Nearby, Huda shows you a less labor-intensive trick. She plucks a swollen stem from a succulent-looking plant and slices it open. It drips slowly, oozing water that smells faintly of cucumbers and despair. You lick your lips. It's not delicious, but it might keep you alive. Your host leans in to whisper something through a half-smile. Real Bedouins don't wait until they're thirsty. You nod solemnly, already feeling like you've broken at least 10 desert rules before lunch. Historians still argue whether the Bedouin water-finding skills are innate tribal wisdom, accumulated over generations, or a mixture of local trial and error combined with intense observational learning. Either way, no one teaches it in school. You earn it, through repetition, and the occasional mistake that makes your eyebrows raise permanently. You move on, taking note of everything now. The bend in the acacia trees that might mean wind-borne moisture, the the beetles that only emerge where there's hidden damp under rocks. You learn to sniff, squint, crouch. You're essentially being trained to become the desert's nosy neighbor. As you walk, your host shares a story, half fable, half memory, about a man who survived 8 days without water. He lived by licking dew off his camel's fur before dawn. You wonder briefly, how far down your own will to live scale you'd go before licking camel. Bedouins also use animal behavior as water indicators. Camels are, of course, the drama queens of thirst, but goats, donkeys, and even birds can hint at nearby water. If a small flock circles low in the afternoon, chances are they're heading to a waterhole, and where there's a waterhole, there might also be a tent, some coffee, and more of that miraculous flatbread. Another trick you learn: carrying water in animal skin pouches, or kerber, helps it stay cooler than in modern plastic bottles. The pores in the leather allow tiny amounts to evaporate, cooling the rest through a natural process. You run your hand along the outside of your host's pouch. It's warm, but less so than the air. You feel mildly betrayed by your backpack's fancy water bottle. Later you come upon a cluster of palm trees, the surest sign of a hidden spring. The shade is glorious. It's like nature opened a tiny desert spa just for you. Beneath the palms, Bedouins have built a low stone wall around a shallow pool. The water is cloudy, buzzing with a few insects, but as precious as gold. Your host lets you rinse your face. You close your eyes, letting the coolness soak in. The sounds of the oasis fade into a low hum: buzzing flies, distant camel grunts, the rustling of palm fronds like nature whispering lullabies. You sit, resting in the shade, chewing on a date that tastes like syrupy sunlight. Beside you, a goat tries to eat your sandal. You let it. In the quiet, you understand the desert doesn't give water, it hides it. It tests you, makes you prove you belong, and if you pass, it rewards you with a trickle, a drop, a palm-shaded miracle. You've gone from overhydrated tourist to slightly dusty apprentice. You're still not quite ready to sniff out an underground spring using only beetle gossip, but you're closer. You refill your pouch, carefully, with a reverent splash, and prepare to walk on. The desert stretches out ahead, still hot, still harsh, but a little less mysterious now. And you? You're just thirsty enough to keep going. You continue walking with a little more confidence, a little more slosh in your water pouch, and let's be honest, a little more sand in places you didn't know sand could go. The path winds toward a cluster of tents, their dark, slanted shapes fluttering in the breeze, like sails waiting to catch stories instead of wind. As you approach, there's laughter. The kind of soft, rippling laughter that signals a gathering of women, gossip, and something that smells faintly herbal and suspiciously good. You're ushered inside one of the tents, where sunlight filters through goat hair seams in golden threads. You're about to learn something important. Bedouin beauty is not for the faint of heart, or the well-moisturized. Mainstream fact: Bedouin women, living in one of the harshest environments on Earth, have developed intricate, practical, and culturally rich beauty rituals. These aren't about fashion, they're about protection, identity, and continuity. Coal-lined eyes aren't just for drama, they block glare, reduce infection risk, and yes, happen to look fantastic when narrowed in judgment. You'll get judged soon, don't worry. You're offered a small hand mirror. You look like a sunburnt raisin in robes. Your guide, Huda again, always ready with a smirk, raises a tiny pot of black powder, coal. She grinds it with something that looks like an ancient eyeliner wand and leans in. You blink, I poke. That's the deal. You blink, she pokes, and suddenly your eyes sting slightly, but you can see, like really see. The sun's glare softens, your vision sharpens, and for the first time you realize how the desert paints in layers: gold, umber, and endless, sweeping beige. Your reflection in a copper bowl looks fierce, sort of. Fringe tidbit: some Bedouins historically made coal from burnt frankincense, lead sulfide, or charred date pits, ground fine and mixed with oil. Each tribe has its own twist, and application is a bit of an initiation. Children often get their first coal lines after surviving their first sandstorm, like earning stripes, but with more eye-watering. Next, you're handed a bowl of reddish-brown paste. It smells earthy, and slightly sweet. Henna. Someone lifts your sleeve and pulls your hand gently into their lap. You don't resist. The cool henna is painted across your palm, blooming in slow, deliberate swirls. Flowers, stars, strange vines you suspect mean something cheeky. Henna isn't just for weddings here. It's used to cool the skin, ward off evil, and mark occasions: births, travel, the arrival of stubborn guests like you. The designs are often layered with meaning, tribe symbols, family roots, protective motifs. You sit quietly while it dries, hands out like you're waiting for a psychic reading. Historians still argue whether Bedouin henna designs originated with ancient Arabian tribes, or if they evolved through cross-cultural trade, brought by spice caravans, sailors, or possibly that one dramatic trader who insisted he was also a visionary stylist. You're shown a slab of stone with what looks like ground herbs mixed with animal fat. A woman gestures for you to lean in. It's a desert perfume, herbal, musky, not the kind you'd find at a duty-free shop. It's dabbed behind your ears, onto your wrists. The scent is grounding, a blend of myrrh, ash, and something vaguely minty. You feel like you've just been claimed by the wind. Then comes the exfoliation. Outside, beside the cooking fire, someone motions you over and hands you a handful of gritty paste. For skin, she says. You raise an eyebrow. She nods. You try it. Sand and dried herb, maybe a hint of oil. It smells like sage and salt, and impending regret. You scrub your arms. It works. A layer of dust and yesterday's mistakes vanishes. You feel soft, sun-warmed, and slightly abraded. Desert spa, Bedouin edition. You ask half-jokingly about sunscreen. Your host nods gravely and pulls out a tiny pouch. Inside, crushed dried figs, goat butter, and yes, what appears to be powdered crocodile dung. You don't ask too many questions after that. What you do ask about is hair care. Everyone's hair looks suspiciously good out here. A woman produces a small wooden comb, curved and hand-carved, then a jar of oil, olive or argan, thick and dark. Hair is oiled daily, braided tightly against the wind, sometimes wrapped in cloth. It's protected like treasure. You try the oil. You smell like a salad. You don't mind. Someone points at your fingernails. You look down. They've seen better days. A thin twig is used as a file, leaves ground into polish. Suddenly, your hands are cleaner, your cuticles soothed. You're being pampered like royalty, dusty, sweaty royalty. You lie back on a woven mat, your face still tingling from the scrub, your arms henna-stained, your eyes lined with desert steel. There's laughter nearby, a rustling of robes, the slow hush of grinding stones. In this world, beauty is both armor and ritual. It's passed down not with textbooks, but with gentle hands and knowing glances. It's whispered, shared, and applied with the same care as a blessing. The women offer you a final gift, a single silver bracelet, etched with tiny dots and crescents. You slip it on, the metal warm from their hands. They say it wards off the ain, the evil eye. Whether or not it works, you feel protected, grounded. The wind kicks up again outside. Sand flickers at the edges of the tent, but inside, the air is rich with herbal smoke and soft laughter. You rest your head back, hands still outstretched, and exhale. The desert may be rough, but its beauty, like its water, is hidden in plain sight. Later, as the shadows grow long and the wind shifts again just slightly like a curtain being drawn, you follow the sound of faint clapping and the rhythmic thump of what might be a drum or a bucket. It's unclear. Outside the tent, the stars are starting to blink alive, one by one. And in the wide circle of lantern light, a group has gathered, not for war, not for strategy, but for something far more powerful in the desert. Poetry. Yes, poetry. You settle onto a cushion someone kindly pats, next to an elder chewing dried apricots and nodding in time with a beat only he can hear. The air smells faintly of cardamom smoke, and whatever someone just burned by accident over the fire. Mainstream fact: Bedouin culture is profoundly oral. Stories, genealogies, laws, and identities are carried through the spoken word, especially through poetry. And not just the kind scribbled into journals. We're talking full-blown from memory, crowd-stirring, improvised poetry battles, like rap battles, but with camels watching. Someone begins. His voice is deep, like gravel wrapped in honey. You can't catch every word, but the rhythm pulses in your chest. His arms move with the verses, pointing, circling, shaping the air. It's a love poem, or maybe a lament about his neighbor's goat eating his tent flap. Either way, it's moving. Fringe tidbit: there are actual cases of poets becoming tribal celebrities. Entire battles were avoided, or provoked, based on a single verse. Some were so talented that rulers paid to keep them quiet. Because in the desert, words linger longer than footprints. Now it's her turn. A woman in a patterned shawl stands. Her voice is softer, more melodic. The group leans in. It's a tale of heartbreak and wind, of stars that promised too much, and a caravan that never returned. You catch the phrase, "He said he'd come with the full moon." You already know he didn't. Around the circle, people begin clapping gently in rhythm. the kind of slow clap that doesn't mock, but invites. You try to join in, you're off, very off, a toddler could do better, but no one minds. Then come the flutes. Small reed-made flutes appear like magic, pulled from sleeves and sashes. The melodies are haunting, notes bent like mirages. You close your eyes. The music winds its way through the camp, snaking between lanterns and across the sand. It's not polished, it's not rehearsed, and that's what makes it perfect. Historians still argue whether these Bedouin musical traditions stemmed from ancient nomadic groups predating Islam, or if they evolved alongside trade routes, absorbing hints of Byzantine, Persian, and East African rhythms. What's clear is this: they're hypnotic. Someone hands you a drum, small, worn, possibly cursed. You tap it once, thump. The elder next to you nods. Encouragement, or pity, hard to say. You keep tapping, trying to match the pulse. The beat stumbles. You abandon the drum and go back to clapping very gently. Then comes a story, not a poem, but a full-blown tale. An old man with a beard that looks like it's seen empires gestures you closer. The group quiets. His voice rasps like wind through rock. He tells of a woman who once raced a sandstorm on foot. She ran from one oasis to another with nothing but a handful of dates and a promise to her child. She beat the storm by minutes. Her footprints were still warm when it hit. You stare at the fire, picturing her, wind in her scarf, sand clawing at her heels. The kind of story you want to believe, even if you shouldn't. There's a pause, then more music, more clapping, more verses that don't need translation, because their weight is in the voice, not the words. Someone nudges you gently. A bowl of dates. You eat one, then another. You've had approximately 37 dates since arriving in this tent, and you're not even mad about it. The stars are fully awake now, so is the moon, washing everything in silver and silence between songs. The camel that bit you earlier walks past like it owns the place. It probably does. A boy stands to recite next. Young, maybe 12, his voice cracking slightly as he begins. His poem is about his uncle's cooking, his sister's snoring, and a goat that refuses to stop screaming at night. The group roars with laughter, clapping their appreciation. You laugh too. You don't even need to understand every word, because out here, in the middle of this infinite nowhere, the music and the stories connect everyone, and they outlast the flames. You lean back again, belly full of dates, eyes heavy with stars. Someone hums a lullaby, low and soft, barely a whisper. The fire pops quietly, and even the sand seems to hush. This is no concert, no performance. It's communion. With each word spoken, with each note played, you feel the desert draw you in just a bit more, until you're not just hearing the stories, you're inside them. The fire has shrunk to a lazy glow, and the songs have dwindled into murmured conversations. But your night isn't quite over yet. Someone waves you over, an elder with a sand-colored keffiyeh, and the deeply lined face of a man who's either extremely wise or simply very sunburned. His name is Salem, and he's about to walk you through the quiet code that holds this whole world together. Forget written contracts. Out here, the desert has no paper, no pens, and no legal notaries. What it does have is honor, and a lot of eye contact. Mainstream fact: tribal identity among the Bedouins is paramount. Loyalty to one's family and clan shapes everything from where you can travel, to who you can marry, to which camel is safe to borrow. Spoiler: none of them are safe if it's not your clan. Your name isn't just yours, it's your father's, your grandfather's, and your entire lineage all bundled into one long poetic roll call. You're never just Ali. You're Ali, son of Mahmud, son of Hamza, of the Bani Khalid, and so on until you run out of breath or daylight. Salem invites you to sit beside a group of men passing around small glasses of tea, so sweet it could probably glue carpets to ceilings. You're quickly given a cup, third fill, not first, which you later learn is a sign of politeness. First is for honored guests, second for good friends, and third for we're not sure about you yet, but we're watching. You sip slowly. The conversation is low, even-paced, but beneath the surface is a rich tapestry of etiquette, gestures, and unspoken rules. Who sits where, who speaks first, who pours the tea, all of it carries meaning. Fringe tidbit: some Bedouin tribes hold poetic duels, not just for fun, but to resolve disputes. Instead of yelling or fighting, two members might engage in a public poetry exchange, gently mocking or challenging one another, until either one yields, or everyone gets too hungry, and calls it a draw. Try doing that next time your neighbor's Wi-Fi leaks into your house. Salem tells you about Urf, the customary law of the desert. It governs marriage, inheritance, hospitality and justice, passed down orally, across centuries. There are no jails here, no judges in wigs. But if you steal a man's goat, you better be prepared to answer not just to him but to a whole council of uncles, who all look vaguely disappointed in you. Historians still argue whether URF evolved as a parallel to Islamic law, or predates it. Salem murmurs, but one thing is sure: without it, this sand would have swallowed us whole. The tea changes flavors, now with sage, now with mint, now possibly thyme, or whatever was growing next to the tent. You can't be sure. What you are sure of is that your bladder is beginning to lose this battle. Conversation turns to marriage alliances, not love matches, though those happen too, but strategic partnerships between clans. It's like diplomacy, but with better snacks. One man shares how his grandfather married into a rival tribe to end a decades-old blood feud, and then stole their best camel, just to keep things interesting. Then there's guest rights. You, for example, are currently untouchable. As a guest under this tent, you're owed food, water, and protection. Even if someone really wanted to punch you over that time you sat on their rug backward, true story, they'd have to wait until you left the camp, which you won't. Not now. Not until you finish this fourth glass of tea. You glance at a group of women a little distance away, tending to food, laughing softly. In Bedouin culture, women hold significant power within the home, and often serve as the holders of oral tradition. It's usually the grandmothers, who remember the intricate family trees that keep tribal connections intact. One woman notices you looking, and raises an eyebrow, amused. You pretend to cough into your tea. She's seen right through you. Everyone here seems to know what you're thinking before you do. It's not about reading minds, it's about reading patterns. In a place where every gesture has meaning, where words matter, and reputations stick like sand on damp skin, people pay attention. They remember what you said, what you didn't say, who you thanked, how many dates you took before offering some back. And somehow, this intricate web of silent laws works. There are disputes, yes, sometimes fierce ones, but there's also a rhythm to it. An agreement that survival here isn't a solo act. You live, thrive, and die as part of a group. The camel you wronged earlier returns. It snorts directly into your face, and then wanders off, tail swishing like a challenge. You look to Salem for guidance. He grins and simply says, "You're part of the tribe now." You're not sure if he's joking, but the group laughs, and you laugh with them. Someone starts up a quiet rhythm on a frame drum again, not a performance, just a pulse, like a heartbeat under the sand. As the night deepens, the conversations mellow into soft exchanges. You hear the words sabr and karam, patience and generosity, over and over again. These aren't just values here, they're survival skills. To rush, to hoard, to act without thought. These are the things that get you lost, get you exiled, or worse, make your tea bitter. You've already learned the most sacred code: make eye contact when you speak, never ask for more than you need. And if someone offers you the last date, take it. But then offer it back. It's not about the fruit, it's about the dance. You lean back, full of tea and silence, the fire flickering across, faces carved by years of wind and sun. You're not from here, you probably never will be, but for this moment, this still quiet moment, you're exactly where you belong. It's not even noon yet, but the sun already presses down like a thick wool blanket fresh from the fire. You shift in place, brushing warm sand off your lap for the 20th time, and wonder how on earth anyone could possibly eat in this heat. But eat you will, and not just eat. You're about to attend a full-fledged Bedouin feast. No utensils, no menus, no idea what's coming, just your fingers, a square of carpet, and a slowly roasting goat whose aroma could rouse the sleepiest camel. The host, your new uncle for the day apparently, gestures grandly for you to sit cross-legged on a wide mat beneath the shade of a wind-worn canopy. You do your best to mimic everyone else's relaxed posture, but your feet immediately fall asleep, and your knee cracks loud enough to earn a few polite chuckles. Off to a strong start. Mainstream fact: in traditional Bedouin culture, hospitality isn't just a virtue, it's a sacred obligation. Hosting someone, especially for a meal, is a show of status, pride, and honor. The more generous the feast, the more respected the host. And today, your host is pulling out all the stops. A copper tray appears, its center dominated by a golden mound of rice shimmering with melted ghee and saffron. Nestled within it, like a king on his throne, is a roasted goat. Its skin is crisp to perfection, its aroma rich with cinnamon, clove, and something else you can't name but immediately want to bottle as a cologne. No forks, no knives, just hands and bread. A younger man tears off a soft cloud-like chunk of flatbread and dips it into the rice before offering it to you. First bite always goes to the guest of honor. That's you, by the way, even if you feel about as elegant as a sunburnt turtle right now. You reach forward, trying to emulate the quiet, practiced motions around you. Thumb, first 2 fingers, scoop, compact, lift to mouth, easy, until your generous rice ball collapses mid-air and lands directly on your tunic. Silence, then someone giggles, then the group laughs gently with you, not at you, and a second serving is passed without hesitation. You're initiated now. A little rice on the chest never killed anyone. Fringe tidbit: Bedouins once used dried desert truffles, not the fancy European kind, but earthy, knobbly ones found near storm-washed tree roots, as both a delicacy and medicine. Sometimes they were even served at feasts like this, stewed in camel milk or roasted in hot sand. You scan today's spread for any suspiciously fungi-like lumps, but all seems safe for now. The meal continues, punctuated by murmured prayers and occasional small talk. You learn quickly that talking during meals is kept minimal, not out of formality, but practicality. Mouths are full, and attention is on the food. Eating together isn't just nourishment, it's bonding, a communal act of peace and rhythm. Historians still argue whether the classic Bedouin communal meal evolved from necessity or design. Someone remarks as they pass you a particularly succulent piece of meat. But either way, it works. Sharing is survival. A second tray arrives, this one bearing sweet dates, fresh goat cheese wrapped in palm leaves, and small dense pastries soaked in honey. Just when you think your stomach might burst from happiness, a server approaches with tiny cups of kalwa, Bedouin-style coffee infused with cardamom, and served bitter, in contrast to the sugary tea from last night. 1 cup, then another, but never a fourth. That's the rule. 3 cups show respect, any more suggests you're settling in permanently, and nobody here needs another mouth to feed indefinitely. You nod your thanks and gently place your cup upside down to signal you're done, just as you were taught. Nearby, children chase each other through patches of shade, flinging handfuls of sand and laughter. An elder sits quietly in a corner, slowly chewing a piece of dried fig, and watching everything with the calm of someone who's seen it all before, and probably made this exact rice dish better 40 years ago. As the meal winds down, someone offers you a basin of water and a towel for your hands. You wash with care, trying not to look too delighted at the coolness on your fingers. Sand is everywhere, but somehow the water washes away not just grit, but that gnawing feeling of being a stranger. Someone leans over and whispers, "Next time, you'll help roast the goat." You're not sure if it's a promise or a threat, but you smile anyway. You ask about the bread, how it's made so fluffy in the middle and crisp on the edges. A woman nearby smiles, and answers through a translation from a teenage niece. It's baked on an iron dome set over coals, flipped by hand at exactly the right second. The dough listens to your mood, she says mysteriously. You don't ask her to elaborate. You suspect the dough wouldn't like your current level of confusion. As the plates are cleared and the mats are dusted off, there's no formal thank you or applause, just nods, a slow gathering of bodies back to the day's tasks, and the comforting sound of someone tuning a rebab, a single-stringed instrument that sounds like it's made for sighing. The sun hasn't moved much, but the shadows have shifted. You lie back, full and dazed, letting the sound of distant camel grunts and soft humming roll over you. Somewhere in your pocket, a date pit rolls loose, a small souvenir of a meal you'll never forget, even if you're still chewing sand. The sun is sinking again, low and slow, like it's not in any particular hurry. The dunes take on new colors now, blush pinks, soft ambers, even a little violet if you squint just right. You've made it through the scorching daylight hours with only mild sandburn and a stomach full of roasted goat. Not bad, all things considered. But now, you're in for something entirely different. Something that can't be roasted, brewed, or tied down. Tonight, you're going to a Bedouin wedding, and let's be honest, you didn't pack a single appropriate outfit. You're ushered toward the gathering by a group of giggling children, 2 of whom insist on adjusting your headscarf. One of them smacks your shoulder lightly, and declares in Arabic, "You look like a lost goat." You smile, unsure if that's a compliment. Mainstream fact, Bedouin weddings are grand events, sometimes lasting days. Even nomadic tribes will pause their movements to celebrate. These aren't just social get-togethers, they're strategic alliances, rites of passage, and full-on cultural showcases rolled into one long festive blur. Tonight's wedding is in full swing by the time you arrive. There's drumming, not the chaotic, loose-limbed kind you're used to from high school talent shows, but rhythmic, deep, heartbeat-level drumming that seems to come from beneath the sand. Women ululate behind a screen, high-pitched trills that flutter in the night like birds calling across the dunes. You're guided to the men's side of the celebration. Traditionally, Bedouin weddings separate the genders, not out of repression, but out of ceremony. The women's tent, you're told with a smirk, is where the real dancing happens. Over here, it's more about poetry battles, competitive coffee brewing, and slightly awkward clapping. Fringe tidbit: some tribes had, and still have, customs where a bride's identity remains veiled, not just for modesty, but to test the groom's patience, respect, and observation. One variation involved hiding the bride among her similarly dressed cousins, and if the groom picked wrong, well, he'd owe another camel. Or 3. You sit cross-legged on a woven rug, near a circle of older men. They're trading lines of love poetry, like it's a fencing match. One recites a verse about eyes, like desert springs. Another counters with one about wind lifting a veil. Everyone nods solemnly. You write down a few phrases in your notebook, immediately ruining their magic with your terrible handwriting. Someone offers you mabsora, a sweet pastry stuffed with dates and rolled in toasted sesame. You take 2, it feels like the polite thing to do. Suddenly, a young man stands and begins to dance. Not wild or showy, but slow, deliberate, as though each movement were tied to a memory. His hands slice through the air like they're following invisible calligraphy. Around him, others rise, forming a semicircle. This is the Ada, a traditional sword dance, not performed with real blades tonight, thankfully, but long sticks that glint under the firelight. Historians still argue whether the Ada began as a war ritual or a wedding rite. A soft voice says beside you. It's one of the tribe's elders, his face half lit, eyes reflecting fire. I say it's both. Love is a kind of war, no. He chuckles at his own joke. You chuckle too, unsure whether it was funny or prophetic. Across the open space, a burst of color flashes through the firelight, bright scarves, silver bangles, shimmering robes. It's the women, dancing behind the screen. You can't see the moves, but you can hear the rhythm, anklet bells, laughter, and the sharp clack of palm against palm. It's intoxicating. One of the younger boys near you elbows your side. You want to see the bride. He whispers with the glee of someone who's just offered you a peek at a rare comic book. You nod. He waves you toward a side tent, but an older woman intercepts with a mock scowl and a finger wag. No peeking. Not yet. Still, you get your wish. After much anticipation, the bride appears, veiled, radiant, surrounded by her family. She doesn't say much, but her eyes do. Her gaze, calm and steady, surveys the crowd. There's a power in that look. You wouldn't dare guess what she's thinking. You're just a visitor, here for the ambiance. There's a brief ceremony, prayers, blessings, a few words you can't translate but feel in your chest. And then the music surges again. Louder now, faster. Someone starts clapping, and it spreads like wildfire. Even you clap, offbeat, unsure, but happily lost in the noise. Later, as the celebration winds down, you're invited to sit with the newlyweds for a brief blessing. You offer a quiet Mabruk, the universal Arabic congratulations, and are rewarded with a shy smile from the groom. The bride, still veiled, dips her head in acknowledgement. You don't say anything else. What could you say? You were just a guest at a night that will live in family stories for decades. As you return to your sleeping rug, your ears still ring with the drum beat. Your body, exhausted from clapping, dancing and too many honeyed pastries, begins to melt into the cooling sand. Somewhere, beyond the tents, the dunes shimmer beneath starlight. And you wonder if weddings in air-conditioned hotels will ever feel quite the same again. When you wake the next morning, the wedding drums have faded, leaving behind only the faint echo of laughter and the scent of rosewater in the breeze. The camp is quieter now, peaceful in that special way that follows celebration. But there's no such thing as a lazy day in Bedouin life. Today you're heading out with the caravan. Yes, an actual caravan. Not the kind with built-in fridges and solar panels, but the kind that smells faintly of camel hair and carries treasures wrapped in woolen sacks. You're joining a trading journey, part business trip, part social event, part endurance test with minimal shade. The camels grunt as they're loaded. Their expressions say, "We've done this before, and it's never fun." You're given a spot between a spice merchant, with suspiciously few teeth, and a teenage boy who spends the entire morning singing one line of a song over and over, but you're too fascinated to mind. Mainstream fact: For centuries, Bedouin tribes acted as crucial intermediaries in regional trade routes, especially across the Arabian Peninsula. They transported frankincense, myrrh, dyed textiles, precious metals, and even ostrich feathers from one end of the desert to the other, without GPS of course, just stars, instinct, and a memory for every rock. The lead merchant is a woman named Tariq. She's older than the sand, or so she claims, and could negotiate the price of gold using only her eyebrows. She explains that Bedouin traders weren't just delivering goods, they were curators of gossip, knowledge, even poetry, and sometimes, well, smugglers. Fringe tidbit: some desert caravans are rumored to have smuggled forbidden books, ancient manuscripts, or even people, slipping them through checkpoints with the help of disguise, bribes, or just a very stubborn camel. There's one half-believed tale of a prince dressed as a spice porter to escape an arranged marriage. As your caravan snakes through the dunes, you pass a group of strangers approaching from the opposite direction. A silent exchange occurs, no words, just subtle hand gestures, narrowed eyes and a few nods. You blink and it's over. Tariq leans toward you and says, "They're not traders, they're tax collectors." She spits into the sand, an ancient insult. You ask what happens if you get stopped. She smiles, unbothered. "We share coffee." They get distracted. "Sometimes we sell them back their own camels." You decide not to ask further. At midday, the caravan halts. A striped canopy is pulled out and anchored into the sand. Dates are passed around, along with slivers of salted goat cheese and warm flatbread. You chew slowly, trying not to inhale too much sand with your lunch. Everyone lounges in the shade, and one of the older men pulls out a rebab, a one-stringed instrument with a bow. The notes that follow are long wailing things, half music, half weather report. The kind of sound that makes you think of lost cities buried in the dunes. Historians still argue whether these caravans spread more culture than commerce, says the teenager beside you, suddenly erudite between bites. People think trade was about goods, but it was ideas, stories, marriage offers, sometimes revolutions. Then he resumes singing that same single song line, completely undermining his moment of brilliance. Later, the terrain changes slightly. Rocky patches emerge, dotted with thorny shrubs. The camels navigate them like professionals, but your behind does not. You bounce in the saddle, gripping the reins like a tourist on a theme park ride. Tariq glances back at you and says, "Don't sit, float." Easy for her to say, she's practically one with her camel. At the edge of a stony rise, the caravan halts. You've arrived. It's not a town in the usual sense. Just a temporary market, colorful tents staked beside a well, with vendors yelling in at least 4 languages. Someone's selling dyed wool, another hawks tiny brass mirrors. And in one corner, a group of children play a betting game using dried camel droppings as dice. You help unload, passing sacks of saffron and dried figs to a sleepy merchant who insists you sample everything. You try a candied lemon peel, and nearly cry. It tastes like sun and old secrets. As night falls, the market becomes something else. Braziers are lit. The air smells of cardamom and charcoal. Everyone you pass seems to be negotiating something. Prices, marriages, alliances. Tariq clinks silver rings with a man from across the desert, and then nods to you. "We're staying here tonight." You get first watch. You assume she's joking. She is not. Still, you find yourself watching the stars again, those same steady companions, scattered across a velvet sky. Somewhere in the distance, a jackal cries. The camels are already asleep. One snores like a grandfather, and you think back to that prince in disguise, riding hidden among the spices and incense. Maybe he made it. Maybe he's out there still, laughing with a toothless merchant and dancing at weddings where no one knows his name. Maybe, just maybe, you'll dream of him tonight. The next morning, the market is already being dismantled, tents collapsing in clouds of dust, as merchants pack up their unsold goods and caravan drivers stretch aching limbs. You stir beneath a makeshift awning, blinking against the sun as it climbs the horizon with unhurried confidence. Another day begins in the desert. No alarms, no notifications, just the hush of wind brushing against your face, and the soft rhythmic groan of camels waking up. You're told the caravan won't be moving until late afternoon. It's better to travel at twilight, when the sands cool and the stars rise to light the way. That means you've got time. Time for one last bit of desert life. Something Tariq calls dune whispering. You follow her away from the market, past boulders like sleeping beasts, and into quieter stretches of sand, nothing but silence. Or at least, that's what you think at first. Mainstream fact, oral storytelling has always been central to Bedouin culture. Fables, tribal histories, poetic duels, all passed down without paper, ink, or formal classrooms. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were memory, reputation, survival. A tale could secure you a marriage, warn you of treachery, or immortalize your name across 100 miles of desert. You settle on a patch of shaded sand as Tariq begins. But she's not telling the usual history of kings or battles. No, these are ghost stories of the dunes, jinn tales, whispers of the unexplainable, warnings wrapped in wonder, fringe tidbit. In Bedouin belief, jinn spirits made of smokeless fire inhabit the desert. They can be benevolent, mischievous, or downright terrifying. Some travel with caravans in secret, others guard wells, whispering to travelers who get too close at night. There's one, she says softly, that lives near the salt flats. It sings, at first just a note, like wind through hollow bone. Then it copies your voice. If you follow it, thinking it's someone you love, well, you never come back. They say it weeps when you leave, but not out of sadness, out of hunger. You laugh nervously. She does not. You ask if she believes in these stories. She shrugs. Historians still argue whether jinn tales were just ways of explaining dangerous terrain, or real beliefs that shaped behavior. But either way, when the sand moves in circles without wind, you don't stick around to investigate. You shift closer to the fire, just in case. One of the younger boys joins and begins his own tale, less frightening, more absurd. A cursed camel that could teleport. A woman who married a jinn prince but divorced him, because he never bathed. The group roars with laughter, even as the older listeners shake their heads. That's the thing about these stories. They live between fear and humor, between warnings and entertainment. They are flexible, like the desert itself. As the sun starts to dip, you walk out alone among the dunes, your sandals crunching against crystals of salt and shattered shell. Yes, shattered shell. Millennia ago, parts of this desert were underwater. It's humbling to realize that the sand you're sinking into might have once been a seabed, filled with fish, coral, and possibly the ancestors of whatever's currently trying to crawl into your sock. You pause at the top of a dune and close your eyes. The wind howls low, like it's carrying someone else's breath. Far off, a camel bell jingles, then stops. For a moment, it's just you, the stars, and the stories clinging to the grains around you. Later, back at the camp, you gather with the others again. The stories shift tones, some tragic, some triumphant, all stitched together with cleverness and desert logic. There's a tale of a thief who stole the moon's reflection and sold it to a village for goats. One of a girl who could outride every man in her tribe, but refused to race unless the prize was silence. One woman recites a poem older than the camp itself, her voice rising like smoke in the still air. You don't understand every word, but the rhythm, steady, swaying, sure, moves something inside you. You imagine Bedouin children hearing that same cadence under different moons, letting it burrow into their sleep. Someone hands you a palm-sized bundle. You unwrap it to find dried herbs, tied with a thread of camel wool. For protection, they say with a smile, against sand spirits. And overcooked mutton. As the fire dies down and the stars reappear, you lie back on a woven mat and try to replay all the ghost stories in your head. They blur together, jinn with glowing eyes, camels that vanish in a blink, wells that speak if you lean close enough. You're not sure what's folklore and what's memory anymore, but you know that something here feels older than time. The boy who once sang a single line, now hums a tune with actual melody. Maybe the desert is teaching him rhythm, or maybe the ghosts finally gave him the full song. Above, the constellations shimmer in their places. There's no light pollution here, no city buzz, just pure sky. You think about how the Bedouins used stars not just for direction, but for timing births, predicting rain, even planning raids. You don't need a calendar when the cosmos keeps the time. And somewhere out there, past the edge of the firelight, something stirs. Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe it's one of those shapeless spirits that drifts between the dunes, gathering stories like sand in its robes. Either way, you pull your blanket a little tighter and smile, because tonight, you've become part of the tale. The next morning, the market is already being dismantled, tents collapsing in clouds of dust, as merchants pack up their unsold goods and caravan drivers stretch aching limbs. You stir beneath a makeshift awning, blinking against the sun as it climbs the horizon with unhurried confidence. Another day begins in the desert. No alarms, no notifications, just the hush of wind brushing against your face and the soft rhythmic groan of camels waking up. You're told the caravan won't be moving until late afternoon. It's better to travel at twilight, when the sands cool and the stars rise to light the way. That means you've got time. Time for one last bit of desert life. Something Tariq calls dune whispering. You follow her away from the market, past boulders like sleeping beasts and into quieter stretches of sand. Nothing but silence. Or at least, that's what you think at first. Mainstream fact, oral storytelling has always been central to Bedouin culture. Fables, tribal histories, poetic duels, all passed down without paper, ink, or formal classrooms. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were memory, reputation, survival. A tale could secure you a marriage, warn you of treachery, or immortalize your name across 100 miles of desert. You settle on a patch of shaded sand as Tariq begins. But she's not telling the usual history of kings or battles. No, these are ghost stories of the dunes, jinn tales, whispers of the unexplainable, warnings wrapped in wonder, fringe tidbit. In Bedouin belief, jinn spirits made of smokeless fire inhabit the desert. They can be benevolent, mischievous, or downright terrifying. Some travel with caravans in secret, others guard wells, whispering to travelers who get too close at night. There's one, she says softly, that lives near the salt flats. It sings, at first just a note, like wind through hollow bone. Then it copies your voice. If you follow it, thinking it's someone you love, well, you never come back. They say it weeps when you leave, but not out of sadness, out of hunger. You laugh nervously. She does not. You ask if she believes in these stories. She shrugs. Historians still argue whether jinn tales were just ways of explaining dangerous terrain, or real beliefs that shaped behavior. But either way, when the sand moves in circles without wind, you don't stick around to investigate. You shift closer to the fire, just in case. One of the younger boys joins and begins his own tale, less frightening, more absurd. A cursed camel that could teleport. A woman who married a jinn prince but divorced him, because he never bathed. The group roars with laughter, even as the older listeners shake their heads. That's the thing about these stories. They live between fear and humor, between warnings and entertainment. They are flexible, like the desert itself. As the sun starts to dip, you walk out alone among the dunes, your sandals crunching against crystals of salt and shattered shell. Yes, shattered shell. Millennia ago, parts of this desert were underwater. It's humbling to realize that the sand you're sinking into might have once been a seabed, filled with fish, coral, and possibly the ancestors of whatever's currently trying to crawl into your sock. You pause at the top of a dune and close your eyes. The wind howls low, like it's carrying someone else's breath. Far off, a camel bell jingles, then stops. For a moment, it's just you, the stars, and the stories clinging to the grains around you. Later, back at the camp, you gather with the others again. The stories shift tones, some tragic, some triumphant, all stitched together with cleverness and desert logic. There's a tale of a thief who stole the moon's reflection and sold it to a village for goats. One of a girl who could outride every man in her tribe, but refused to race unless the prize was silence. One woman recites a poem older than the camp itself, her voice rising like smoke in the still air. You don't understand every word, but the rhythm, steady, swaying, sure, moves something inside you. You imagine Bedouin children hearing that same cadence under different moons, letting it burrow into their sleep. Someone hands you a palm-sized bundle. You unwrap it to find dried herbs, tied with a thread of camel wool. For protection, they say with a smile, against sand spirits. And overcooked mutton. As the fire dies down and the stars reappear, you lie back on a woven mat and try to replay all the ghost stories in your head. They blur together, jinn with glowing eyes, camels that vanish in a blink, wells that speak if you lean close enough. You're not sure what's folklore and what's memory anymore, but you know that something here feels older than time. The boy who once sang a single line, now hums a tune with actual melody. Maybe the desert is teaching him rhythm, or maybe the ghosts finally gave him the full song. Above, the constellations shimmer in their places. There's no light pollution here, no city buzz, just pure sky. You think about how the Bedouins used stars not just for direction, but for timing births, predicting rain, even planning raids. You don't need a calendar when the cosmos keeps the time. And somewhere out there, past the edge of the firelight, something stirs. Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe it's one of those shapeless spirits that drifts between the dunes, gathering stories like sand in its robes. Either way, you pull your blanket a little tighter and smile, because tonight, you've become part of the tale. You're just starting to enjoy the cool air on your face again, when a couple of burly apprentices from the cooper's shop show up, grinning like they've been promised free beer. They don't even bother explaining because honestly, in this town when someone grabs you by the elbow, it's probably not for tea and biscuits. They march you toward the riverbank, where a peculiar wooden contraption waits. At first you think it's some kind of giant seesaw, but no, this is the infamous ducking stool, the medieval multi-tool for public shaming and witch testing. Mainstream historical fact, ducking stools were used mostly on women accused of gossip, scolding or witchcraft, but they were occasionally employed for dishonest traders or quarrelsome men. The victim was strapped into a chair mounted on a long wooden beam, which pivoted over a body of water. Quirky tidbit. Some towns got creative. Instead of fresh river water, a few used the nearest sewage pit, because why not add disease to humiliation? Historians still argue whether the practice was genuinely believed to test guilt, or was simply a crowd-pleasing form of punishment. You're forced into the seat, thick ropes binding your wrists to the armrests, and suddenly you feel every inch of the chair's rough wood against your skin. The beam creaks ominously above you, like it's debating whether to drop you now, or let you stew in dread a little longer. Then, without warning, you're swung out over the water. The world tips and there's a heartbeat of silence before you plunge in. Cold, murky river fills your ears and mouth, bubbles racing past your face. The shock is so sharp you forget to be embarrassed. You thrash instinctively, but the ropes keep you neatly in place, bobbing just enough to prove you're still alive. Up you come, spluttering, hair plastered to your cheeks, crowd laughing from the shore. A man in the front row holds up what might be bread, or might be a very old, very stale potato. It's hard to tell, and honestly, you're too busy gasping for breath to care, and then back down again. The second dunk is worse, because now you know exactly how icy and filthy it is down there. You emerge shivering, teeth chattering like castanets. The whole process repeats until the crowd's appetite for spectacle is satisfied, which could be anywhere from 3 dunks to until the accused learns her lesson. Finally, you're unstrapped, knees wobbly, and escorted back onto dry land. You smell like a cross between riverweed and regret, and the sound of the crowd's fading laughter stays with you like a bad song stuck in your head. Somewhere deep inside, you promise yourself never to speak out of turn again, at least not where someone can hear you. But knowing you, that resolution has an expiration date. You're still dripping, the river water working its way into every seam of your clothes, when the guard to your left mutters something about making it permanent. That phrase is rarely followed by cake. You're led, paraded, through a side street, where the cobbles are slick with the residue of last night's rain. At the far end, smoke coils lazily from a forge, the kind of smoke that clings to your hair for days. The smell is metallic, sharp, and full of warnings your instincts translate as run. Inside, the blacksmith doesn't even look up. He's holding a long iron rod in the coals, and the tip glows a furious orange. You can see the faint outline of a letter carved into the metal. Maybe a T for thief, maybe a V for vagabond. You don't ask. Asking only makes things worse. Mainstream historical fact, branding was a common punishment across medieval Europe, meant to mark criminals permanently, so others could identify them instantly. Different crimes had different letters, M for murderer, B for blasphemer, and so on, burned into skin that would carry the scar for life. Quirky tidbit, in some places they didn't bother with letters at all. They'd brand you with the town crest, turning your forehead into a very unwilling civic billboard. Historians still argue whether this was primarily for deterrence or simply to humiliate offenders beyond repair. The blacksmith pulls the iron free, and the air between you and it ripples with heat. The guards hold your arms tight. You think for a second about jerking away, but they've done this before. They've seen the jerks, the flinches, the pleas. The tip touches your forearm first. There's a moment, just a heartbeat, where your brain refuses to register what's happening. Then pain blooms, white hot and absolute, tearing through every nerve like lightning. You smell yourself burning before you hear your own sharp gasp. When it's over they let go, and you stagger back, clutching the new mark. The skin around it already swells, angry and red, but the letter, or crest, stands clear. That's it. You're branded, a walking, breathing criminal record for everyone to read. You try to shake it off, but in the corner, you spot another man. His brand is years old, the skin puckered and pale now. He catches your eye and smirks, as if to say, welcome to the club you never wanted to join. By the time they shove you back into the street, the air feels colder. Or maybe that's just you, suddenly aware that no matter where you go from here, you'll carry this little piece of glowing iron's opinion for the rest of your days. Your branded arm still throbs like it's keeping its own heartbeat, but the guards aren't finished yet. They turn down another lane, narrower this time, where a tall wooden post stands at the center, weathered, splintered, and darkened by rain and something else you don't want to guess at. It's the whipping post. The medieval equivalent of a public comment section, except the feedback comes in leather and leaves welts. Mainstream historical fact. Whipping posts were common in towns across Europe and colonial America, used to punish crimes like theft, fraud, and public drunkenness. They were deliberately placed in busy squares so everyone could watch, reinforcing the lesson through shared humiliation. The guards tie your wrists high above your head, forcing you onto the tips of your toes. The rope cuts into your skin with each tiny movement, and the wood behind you is rough enough to catch your shirt in little tears. Quirky tidbit. Some towns kept ceremonial whips decorated with bright ribbons, the idea being that even punishment could have a bit of local flair. Historians still argue whether this was meant to make the act seem more like community theatre or just to keep the crowd entertained. The man wielding the whip steps forward, his boots crunch on the gravel, and he drags the leather tails behind him, letting them brush the ground like a lazy predator. He looks at you, not with anger, but with the casual detachment of someone about to chop firewood. The first strike lands across your shoulders. The sound arrives before the pain, a sharp crack that seems to startle even the pigeons on the eaves. Then the sting hits, a searing, prickling fire racing across your skin. You lose count after 5. By 10, the crowd is murmuring, some leaning forward, others turning away. A child giggles until his mother hushes him. You almost want to tell him it's okay. This is the sort of thing people will make jokes about later, long after the sting fades. The executioner, if you can call him that, finishes with one last snap, then tosses the whip onto his shoulder like it's just another day. The guards untie you, and your arms drop like dead weight. You can feel the raised welts forming under your shirt, each one a fresh memory you didn't ask for. As they lead you away, you glance back at the post. The next person will take your place soon enough, and the cycle will keep going. Each crack of leather another reminder that in this world, pain isn't just private, it's public property. You limp on, shoulders still radiating that hot throb from the whipping post, when the guards drag you toward a small crowd gathering around what looks like a jester's worst nightmare of a musical instrument. It's long, metallic, and grotesquely shaped like an oversized recorder, but with clamps instead of finger holes. Welcome to the shame flute. No, it's not for playing sweet medieval lullabies. It's for wearing. Mainstream historical fact. In parts of Germany and the Low Countries during the 17th century, this bizarre device was locked around the neck and hands of offenders, often bad musicians, street brawlers, or disruptive drunkards. The flute was designed so that the criminal's hands were fixed in position, mimicking the act of playing. The result? Hours of parading through town, unable to eat, drink, or even scratch an itch. The guards grin as they hoist the thing into place. It's heavier than it looks. Cold, unyielding iron pressing into your collarbones, your wrists trapped against the tube so tightly you can barely wiggle your fingers. The crowd's laughter blooms like wildfire. Someone starts humming an off-key tune just to mock you. Quirky tidbit. Some records say the shame flute was occasionally adorned with bells, so every awkward step jingled, because nothing says repent like providing your own soundtrack of humiliation. Historians still argue whether these bells were standard practice or just the work of especially creative local officials with too much free time. A guard gives you a push, and you stumble forward, the heavy iron swaying. You try to keep your balance, but the uneven cobblestones make it impossible to walk with dignity. The laughter intensifies when a boy pretends to conduct you like an orchestra. Hours pass, though it feels like days. The metal bites into your skin. The sun climbs, baking the iron until it's warm enough to sting. You're thirsty, but your hands are locked in place. The flute catches on your tunic every few steps, pulling at the fabric, turning your performance into a clumsy pantomime. Somewhere behind you, someone starts clapping in time with your steps. Another person throws a wilted cabbage leaf. A man with a lute plays a deliberately sour chord every time you pass an alley. This is punishment by satire, your misery amplified by an audience that feels like part of the sentencing. When the guards finally unlock the device, your wrists are numb and your neck aches. You half expect to hear phantom jingles as you're led away, the sound of your forced concert still ringing in your ears. But the street swallows you again, and you can't help but think, maybe, just maybe, being pelted with rotten vegetables is slightly better than the next punishment waiting ahead. You've barely caught your breath when the guards steer you down a narrower lane, where the sun seems to vanish behind looming stone walls. The air grows damp, heavy with the scent of mildew, and something sharper, like old iron and fear. You hear it before you see it. the scrape of chains, the faint creak of wood under strain. Then, in the dim light ahead, it appears, the Judas cradle. Imagine a wooden pyramid, maybe 3 feet tall, polished smooth at the point, smooth not from craftsmanship, but from the countless bodies that have met it. It's mounted on a sturdy base, with ropes dangling from a pulley overhead. It looks almost harmless, like some strange carpenter's tool, but your stomach turns, because you know the truth. This is pain disguised as geometry. Mainstream historical fact. The Judas cradle, used in parts of Europe during the late Middle Ages, was a device of torture and intimidation. Victims were suspended above the pyramid-shaped seat and slowly lowered onto its point, either to extract confessions or as a warning to others. It didn't need to kill, it just needed to terrify. Quirky tidbit. Some accounts claim the executioners wore theatrical masks while operating the cradle, devilish grins carved into wood, just to add psychological torment. Historians still argue whether this detail is true or an embellishment from later storytellers, trying to make medieval justice sound even more theatrical than it already was. The guards tie your hands behind your back. The rope bites into your wrists. You're hoisted up just enough to feel your stomach lurch, then lowered until the pyramid's point barely presses against you. They stop, let you hang there. The weight of your own body does the rest. The worst part isn't even the pain, it's the waiting. The way the ropes creak as you shift. The way the wooden tip feels like it's studying you, learning exactly where to push. Sweat runs down your temples, and every shallow breath reminds you of gravity's patience. The crowd here isn't laughing like with the shame flute. They're quieter, their eyes wide, some looking away entirely. This isn't a spectacle meant for humor. This is a lesson in how far fear can stretch before it breaks. A fly lands on your cheek. You can't move to swat it. Somewhere, water drips slowly, rhythmically, like a metronome for misery. The executioner leans in and whispers something you don't quite hear over your own heartbeat. Time stops meaning anything. Minutes could be hours. Your legs tremble, your shoulders burn from the strain of suspension, and every instinct screams to pull away, but there is nowhere to go. The device has you in its quiet, pointed grip. When they finally pull you off, your knees buckle. The ground feels strange under your feet, like you've forgotten how to stand. The crowd disperses, murmuring, and the guards waste no time in pushing you toward yet another shadowed path. Somewhere ahead, another punishment waits, and you're starting to wonder if the next one will make you miss the cradle. The path ahead is quieter now, as if the village itself has run out of jeers. Cobblestones give way to packed dirt, soft enough that your steps make almost no sound. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks twice, then falls silent. The guards walk you to a low stone archway, the kind that forces you to duck your head. On the other side there's no crowd, just a single wooden bench, and resting against it, a device that looks deceptively simple. 2 thick, rough-hewn planks hinged together, each with a half-moon cut into the center. When closed, those half-moons form a perfect circle, large enough to fit around a neck, but not much more. The wooden collar, mainstream historical fact. In parts of medieval Europe and Asia, the wooden collar, sometimes called a kangi, was used to restrain and humiliate offenders. Unlike the stocks which immobilized limbs, the collar made basic life uncomfortable. You could walk, but only slowly. You could sit, but only awkwardly. You could eat, but needed someone to feed you. Quirky tidbit. Some records suggest villagers would hang signs from the collar describing the crime, from gossip to chicken thief. Historians still argue whether the more colorful inscriptions like lazy as a hibernating mole were official punishment, or just the work of bored neighbors with paintbrushes. The guards lift the top plank, and you duck into place. The collar is heavier than you expected. Thick oak, the edges worn smooth, not from care, but from decades of use. When it comes down on your shoulders, the weight pins you like a slow-moving anchor. You try to turn your head, but the collar is too wide. Even looking down is a chore. They don't lock you to a post. That's the point. You're free to wander, free to be seen. The punishment here is mobility paired with misery. Every step makes the wood shift slightly against your collarbone. The planks smell faintly of smoke, as if they've been stored near the blacksmith's forge. You shuffle forward into the sunlight, and sure enough, people notice. A pair of boys walking with baskets glance at you, then whisper something that makes them laugh. An old woman selling bread doesn't laugh. She just stares, like she's trying to decide if you deserve the collar or not. It doesn't take long before your shoulders ache, your arms hang uselessly at your sides, unable to reach your own face. A single itch at your jaw becomes an obsession. You start to sway a little, the weight throwing off your balance. The day drags on, and you learn the true cruelty of the collar. There's no comfortable position. Stand and your neck throbs. Sit, and the plank digs into your chest. Lie down, and the collar forces your head into an awkward angle that keeps you awake. Sleep becomes an idea you can't quite reach. Even the simple act of drinking is humiliating. You lean forward awkwardly, while someone tips a cup toward your lips, hoping they don't miss and send water trickling down your chin. By the second or third awkward sip, you almost prefer thirst. By nightfall, the wooden collar has done its work. Your shoulders burn, your neck is stiff, and your pride is raw from every curious glance. You're returned to the guards, who lift the plank free with a casual motion, as if releasing you from a prison of wood is nothing worth noting. They guide you to a final resting spot, and for the first time, you realize there are no more strange devices in sight. Only a long, low road ahead, the moon just beginning to rise above it. You can breathe again. You can turn your head, and for the first time all day, you start to think maybe you'll survive this.